Good morning. Hi. Thinking about intention, the quote that actually most comes to mind for me is from our December speaker, Brittany Sensabaugh. And she called our audience to move less out of habit and move more out of intention. Because of that, I'm super excited to be able to introduce Ensemble Mik Nawooj, who is shaking up the music industry with their intention in method sampling and new music techniques with their hip-hop orchestra. So if you could help me give a warm welcome today to Ensemble Mik Nawooj.
How are you? Today, we're gonna do basically like a loose sort of talk, and we have some topics that we want to talk about, and then our ED, Christopher Nicholas, is going to. Yes, I will introduce myself after I introduce you. So he's going to moderate, and then we're going to all talk. My name is Juwan Kim. I'm the artistic director and composer of Ensemble Mik Nawooj.
Hi, my name is Christopher Nicholas. I'm the executive director of Ensemble Mik Nawooj.
Hello, my name is Davin Anthony Thompson, also known as Do That. I am one of the resident MCs for Ensemble Mik Nawooj.
My name is Edward James, also known as Sandman, one of the resident artists, MCs, lyricists for Ensemble Mik Nawooj.
So as you could see from our wonderful video clip, we're a pretty large group. So it's two MCs, as you see here, Juwan on piano, flute, clarinet, violin, cello, upright bass, and drums, and we have a soprano vocalist. So, we're very different. We're combining two elements, hip-hop and classical, and making something completely different. And so to start, Juwan, can you tell us a little bit of what you think the differences are between hip-hop and classical and what you're doing with the group?
Sure, but I think that to set it up, and I think it's always always good to personalize a story, and to give you the idea how we start this, and then what we are doing, and how we are here, right? So I'm a classically trained composer, and I did my undergrad at Berklee College of Music, and then I did my master's at San Francisco Conservatory of Music, both studying classical composition. And by the end of my undergrad studies, and I had sort of existential crisis as a classical composer, because I was thinking, imagine a guy that's sitting in Malaysia playing violin or wherever that's not Western Europe, and this violinist is the life goal of this violinist is to getting a job as concertmaster in Berlin Philharmonic. And I thought that was odd to me. And the second problem that I had was that concert music or contemporary concert music that was practiced in the aesthetics that I was studying. And as I was studying these aesthetics, I say aesthetics because after about 2 to 3 years of studying techniques, you start learning how to write meaningful music and going against what has been done. And this is common for modern art now too. And I thought it was, even when I was knowing every single aspect of where this perspective is coming from, I had problems with it. And I realized that the audience were, being alienated, and I didn't like it. And I started hating it, actually. So while I was at the conservatory, I did a novelty piece that had chamber music, and then at the end, I put an MC in it. And then I got two distinctive responses. One, which I fully expected, that my teachers hated it. I reveled at it, of course. And then the second response that I thought was interesting was that the audience really loved it. And not only the audience loved it, we got a full page write-up on Oakland Tribune. It was kind of like a big deal. And after that, I decided to really immerse myself into hip-hop because, mind you, until that time, I didn't know much about hip-hop, and I didn't like it because I thought it was loud. Didn't really understand too much. And there was a conversion experience for me when I encountered NWA, particularly the track "Fuck the Police." And in the middle of the track, I had this experience that I felt like I was dipped into the river of hip hop and then reborn as a hip hop composer. So I finally understood the intention behind the music, and the audacity and the kind of creative power that it had. And it was open to much possibilities. So ever since then, we've been doing this.
Ed, can you expand?
On the differences between hip hop and
yeah,
classical.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think for me, I want to really touch on the difference in one perception, right? So classical music is seen as the pinnacle, right? Hip hop is seen as the lowest rung of music, right? So what, like a lot of times when I hear people talk who feel like they're totally educated and they know exactly what's right and what's wrong, and so guy talking about music, it's like, oh, the Beatles are great, and yeah, they're just the greatest rock group. They talked about all you need is love, and then like somebody's like, what about hip hop? He's like, oh, it's discordant, and then that was it, And so that's to me the biggest difference I see, or rather the perception that these genres have taken on within our greater society. Yeah, because that's pertinent to our further discussion.
Dak, can you expand?
Sure. I think the main difference for me between hip hop and classical music is hip hop is very American in its idea that we use a lot of what's around us, a lot of ideas. There are a lot of different cultures, experiences, and practices represented in hip hop culture, whereas classical comes from a very specific place and a very singular kind of mind state and culture. So I feel like hip hop is an amalgam of the best thing that you can have out of human potential.
There's been a lot of talk about aesthetic principles and how they're very different. So since they obviously are different, and what you could see here, that we were completely creating something completely new. Can you guys talk about your experience creating this new thing? Has there been any pushback between the camps of purist classical musicians and purist hip hop artists? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I think that in explaining what we're doing in a technical level, it could take a long time, but I can actually also personalize it by explaining my process of writing this kind of music. So when I first began to write this music, my idea was to take to me compatible techniques from classical music to hip hop, and only using classical techniques that I think that it would fit, and try to recreate bangers, right? Recreate like Kanye West single that's gonna make millions of dollars. And obviously I failed in doing so. But as I was using these completely foreign techniques and then try to do hip hop music and only using acoustic instruments, I have created something else. So we call this process method sampling, which is a principle of borrowing or sampling rationale or methods and then reframing them into your own system. And it is inherently generative because you could, this is happening right now in culinary field. A person would go to France and study classical techniques, which is French techniques, and then the person will come back and open a burger shop, will be very different. And also somebody like Quentin Tarantino, I don't know whether you know this film, Pulp Fiction, very famous film. When I first saw it when I was in Korea, I came from Korea when I was 20 years old, about 2 years ago. And I was totally blown away because I realized that the narrative, the chronology of the film was all jumbled up, and it was connected thematically, almost like music, right? So, and then I heard Tarantino talking to somebody, it was an interview, and he said that what I did at Pulp Fiction was to actually think of it as a novel. So if you read a novel, then you see that the chronology doesn't really matter. You can go back and forth in time. So he essentially method sample the principles from literature and then superimposed it in film. So that's another example of method sampling, and biomimicry is a method sampling. It just goes on and on. It's not just pertaining to only music. I decide to trademark it. So that's the idea that we have now.
Ed, so can you talk on, since, as Juwan is saying that we're creating this new thing, can you talk on how the audience has responded, how press has responded, like just your general personal experience from, as I mentioned before, classical camp, hip-hop camp, what your personal experience has been?
Well, I mean, from the audience standpoint, the audience has always been responsive. I think there's always this initial thing where we step in front of an audience and they see this, the backdrop of all these classical instrumentalists, and then like two black guys step up to the microphone and we're the MCs and they're like, I don't know, And also at the same time, we've been in front of audiences where I look out and I'm like, I don't know, Because I mean, as an example, I tell this story a lot. We did a show at the Cathedral of Christ Light over here, right by the lake, which to me was a total foreign experience, right? Performing at a church and at a church festival, and so right smack dab in the front row is a 80-year-old gentleman, a white gentleman. He has this walker right next to him, and I'm like, we're about to give this guy a heart attack. This, like, this is, and that was kind of the feeling. But, it also played on the fact that of the perceptions of, like, where I felt like he belonged and where I felt like I belonged, right? And so, but in the end, always, I'm kind of, mystified on the response. So that same guy, like I remember Dad saying, like, throw your hands in the air, and this dude was like, and I'm like, wow, I never expected it. And he comes to me afterward, and he's like, I really enjoyed the scatting that you were doing. And I'm like, that's not at all but I am so glad you enjoyed yourself. And so in general, the audience response has been incredible. Now, there have been individuals there are some people who feel like this is a sort of appropriation. Once again, this is appropriation happening with black music. Somebody, this classical composer wants to do hip hop. God, once again, they are taking black culture. I would argue that, I'm participating in it by choice, and that I don't feel taken anywhere. I feel like I'm participating, and I feel like I'm actually contributing to classical music the same way classical music is contributing to hip hop. And so, and then at the other time, if we're talking about the appropriation of black music, that happened a long time ago, especially in terms of hip hop, as soon as the commodification of it came about, which totally actually changed the cultural expression of it. So yeah, for the most part, it's actually been a very good experience with crowds. Yeah.
Dad, can you tell us your personal experience?
The only thing that I would add from my experience, because like I'm a hip hop purist, you know what I mean? And if I wasn't involved with this project, I might have some critiques for it. Like I would be sensitive about it, you know what I mean? Because black folks get everything taken from them, you know what I mean? And there's a history of that. So of course people are going to be a little on edge when you see hip hop moving into different institutions, and the folks who are used to creating it don't feel like they have any ownership or aren't even welcome in the spaces that, you know what I mean, that they're providing the inspiration for. So yeah, I can't say anything more than what Ed has said. It's just, that's been my experience. And it's been positive. Like, it's been great to have conversations with folks. It's been great to be able to tell my story and like reflect some of my thoughts and have that be received and, be walked into places where I wouldn't even really have I wouldn't have the interest in going. So yeah, I'm thankful.
I want to add a couple things because there were some points that you guys both pointed out that was very interesting to me. And one thing that I want to really be clear about, that this is really not a classical music, because the reason the intention behind my idea was that I wanted to create new concert music that is radically inclusive, and because I'm using method sampling, which essentially is actually an expansion of the idea of sampling, right? The producers sample things, and then I thought that, okay, well, I can actually sample rationales. And then I start finding these examples in the history of classical music. Claude Debussy, for instance, he went to first Russia and then heard this chord that never happened. At the time, Russia was like Asia of Europe, so they were in touch with different kind of cultures, and they did things that Western Europeans didn't do. So he was struck by that, and then he came back and he attended Paris Expo and saw gamelan music. And he wanted to recreate gamelan music, just like I wanted to be like Kanye West, which totally failed. He did the same thing with his training in classical composition. He created this weird thing and created a bunch of problems. And then it is marked in history of music that begins the 20th century music, and then the crazy experimentation that has happened subsequently. So, having said that, this has been happening all the time. And then the largest method sampling that I would say that has happened, it would be the emergence of African American music and African American culture. Because if you think about it, like a group of population that had to totally forego their own identity and had to assume and continuously invent using something completely foreign. It's a definition of method sampling. And that's why it's new. And it is because it's actually using elements of, foreign culture in a very integrated way. It is better. That's why when jazz went to Europe, everybody was like, oh my gosh, like Gershwin went to Ravel to study orchestration, and Ravel said, oh, play the jazz. And then, Ravel actually based his piano concerto on jazz, second one. So my point is that we're actually creating, I don't know whether you guys are going to like this, but hip-hop, neither hip-hop nor classical, but a new thing. And, we have now in this political climate, we have just divide. And then there's no story. And, last election wasn't really the rise of the right, but it's a failure of the left. There's no story that everybody can be part of. Everybody's segregated and hating on each other right now. And I do think there is an example of African Americans created this amazing stuff. And we have to embrace that as American, modern, ergo future.
I just don't get you guys, hate so uncivilized. I'll be trying to empathize, put my shoes in my size while I'm trying to get in. Gotta excuse me, I'm not vibing with it. I'm sending the abyss, dark star. The ball is the argument against the honest reaching up my oranges. Out in the blazing glory, hit the story, I'm born again and no one will focus on the road, so in Oregon. Remember we beat descendants of kings, kin of supreme being pyramid called my genes. So when we build around my anything is also esteemed. So keep us on trouble, control up in the machine and working like zombies. Up all American dream, got me black tears. It seems time to hear my scenes just for a little bit of that dead cream. Sacrifice the air I breathe, so my seeds don't gotta do the same thing. Life.
Thank you so much.